Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. I am, of course, your host, Chris White, and this is the LinkedIn Live program for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders that is by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And I am particularly excited for today's conversation, which, by the way, coming to you a little bit later. We try to do, midday on the eastern part of the United States, but I had to adjust my schedule to accommodate today's guest and frankly, to accommodate my busy schedule. Today's guest is Miss Tia Hopkins. Now, if you don't know Tia, let me tell you a little bit about Tia. First of all, and I have to actually read my notes, she is the field CTO and chief cyber risk strategist with eCentire. Did I get that part right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. She also coaches football. I might even invite her to share a little bit about that. But the thing that I admire and adore most about Tia, as an SE leader, she actually gave me my first piece of business when I launched my business. Actually, that was in 2019 before I had gone full time. So I have a very special place in my heart for Tia because she took a chance on this guy who was relatively unknown and had written a book and invited me to work with her team. Tia, my friend, very good to see you. Thank you for being here. How are you?
Oh, of course, I'm awesome. Excited to be here with you. It's been too long.
You always have the biggest, brightest smile. That's you just brighten up the place. So it's Thanksgiving. Do you have any plans for Thanksgiving?
Yes, I'm gonna go way out into the woods somewhere in a cabin and spend about 4 days with family.
Well, that sounds delightful.
Yeah.
Hopefully, family will all still love one another after 4 days.
We're a tight-knit bunch, but you really test that when you're all under one roof in a house with no malls, no movie theaters, just figuring
Indeed.
you and the bears figuring it out.
Well, Tia, we're going to talk about, quote, the gold standard of pre-sales, or what it means to sort of achieve the gold standard, or what are some of the things that define the gold standard of sales engineering and pre-sales. Before we get into that, though, I'd love for you to just maybe share a little bit of your background. How, all of us in pre-sales, and I know you've elevated your in fact, I think when you and I chatted briefly the other day, you said, really, Chris, I'm more like an executive level SE now, because a lot of what you do is a lot of the same things that we do as sales engineers. But do you mind just taking a minute and sharing with the audience how you got into pre-sales?
Sure. So I've always been into technology, but what I consider my first, I guess, technology type role was installing internet for the phone company. That transitioned into more of an IT focused role. From there, I moved into a role as an IT director, and then decided that I really wanted to specialize because it was really a generalist role. And so I did some research, landed on cybersecurity, and I wanted to go into a hands-on role. Like, I wanted to step out of leadership. I wanted to bang on the keyboard. I wanted to understand the technology. And I started working for this organization that I interviewed for systems engineer, where I would do deployments. During the interview, they offered me to interview for a pre-sales role. And I was like, no, sales, no way, not getting into that, no how. And so they did the old bait and switch. They're like, okay, fine. They made me the offer as systems engineer. Probably 4 to 6 months in, they tossed me on a call. They go, we have no one to take this call. You know how it goes. We need to get you on this call. We need your support. And then after that, they were like, you're never not going to do that again. And now I'm an employee. So what can I say? So that was my first experience in pre-sales, and then I was officially put in the role, and I've been in pre-sales ever since. And so, like a lot of folks that I talk to that are really successful, they stumbled into it, and also agree with me that it's nothing like they thought sales would be. I love it. I never feel like I'm selling a day in my life when I'm doing the right things, right, by the customer, by the prospect. In fact, I say, if I feel like I'm selling, it's probably not a fit. You got to be careful who you say that to, but that's my feeling. If I'm pushing, if I feel like I'm kind of, either there's something I'm missing, something they're missing, or maybe it's just not.
Those are such wise words, that if we feel like we're selling, which the way I translate that is, if we feel like maybe we're sort of pushing something on somebody that might not be a good fit, either there's something missing, there's something we don't understand, or maybe it's actually not a good fit. Chances are we're not doing our job right.
Right.
So how long did it take? Because, by the way, I was the same way. Many of us are that way, right? Like when we first hear sales, like, wait a minute, I'm a technology, right? I'm a technology person. I'm the technologist. I'm not in sales, right? Sales was below me. How long did it take you to sort of, cross that chasm? And how long was it before you sort of woke up like, wait a minute, okay, like I have a different perspective on sales. Like it's not quite what I thought it was.
Yeah, it didn't take very long because I realized that I have my place in this, right? When what I liked about pre-sales, and this may be popular opinion, may not, but I wasn't on the hook to go out and drive the interest. I wasn't on the hook to get the signature, right? So I'm not top of funnel, I'm not bottom of funnel. I'm right in the middle, and that is where I like to sit. If you're interested, oh, I can hook you and I can get you to, pick up what I'm putting down or buy into what I'm selling.
Yeah.
But I don't like the part about having to go out and drive the interest or find the folks that are interested. And so I really appreciated my counterparts for wanting to and being good at doing those things, for building the relationships and making the hard phone calls and the cold calls. And then after you have the meeting where you crush it and you feel like there's no way they're not going to sign, making the phone calls to figure out why they haven't signed yet, and so as I worked with, I would say I was fortunate to work with account execs and sales reps that really understood how to do this, right? Because when you work with sales reps that don't, it does make it harder for you in pre-sales, because you do become more of that, where you're having to manage the relationship as well. But I was fortunate to kind of say, okay, I see how this works. I see where my role is. I see where I need to come in and knock it out of the park, and maybe come back in and do that a few times. But I actually enjoyed it because I felt like, I'm right in the middle of the funnel. I'm right where the action is, right? I want to be in the middle of it, the thick of it. Give me the hard problems. I'm going to tell you why the competition doesn't hold a candle to us, and how I can solve your problem better than anyone else. And I actually really loved it. And what I said to myself, it's funny, I said this in an interview once. I told a pre-sales leader that I did not feel like what I was doing was selling. I felt like I was listening and solving problems, guiding buyers towards solution that solved problems for them. And he gave me some, what he called candid feedback. Like, you don't want to say that to a pre-sales leader. I said, all right, I still believe it though. that's what I'm here to do.
Absolutely. Well, and we have sort of to me, we have the best part of the sales process and the sales life cycle,
Yes.
right? To your point, like, and by the way, we have to give credit where credit's due. Like you said, it's the BDRs and the SDRs and the AEs. They're knocking on the doors. They're prospecting and getting the party started, as I like to say. But then we're sort of brought in as the expert. We're invited into the party, right, as the expert. And you're right. At the end of the day, we don't necessarily, I mean, look, at the end of the day, the team helps, the team crosses the finish line together. But, it's usually the AE that's, dealing with procurement and, chasing people down and sort of getting that ultimate, signature on the dotted line, right?
Yeah,
So,
we're like the DJ at the party. We got to make sure everybody stays at our party and doesn't go look for the neighbor's party, right?
I love that. I had never heard it put that way. We are the DJ that makes sure everybody stays at our party. So let's break this down a little bit further in terms of, quote, the gold standard. In fact, I remember when, I think it might have even been the first conversation you and I ever had. I remember you said, Chris, I'm looking for someone to come in and help me define the gold standard of what it means to be a sales engineer in my organization. And I actually think that we did that to a certain degree. Now, there were two things that you just mentioned: listening and problem solving. Let's pick some of these. Would you say those are two things that go on the list when defining the gold standard?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because if you're not listening, and it's active listening, because you could sit in a room and you can listen, but often the mistakes technically minded individuals make is listening to answer, right? Where it's like, we're in a court of law, and we're the defense and that's the prosecution, and they're making their case, and we're listening to everything they say, and we're preparing our argument as they speak, right? And sometimes that kind of gets us in the hot water because the response that we're giving is one that we've given, and it's not necessarily wrong or inaccurate, but it's also maybe not, what the individual or the group that we're speaking to needs, right? We've answered a very high level what, but maybe we didn't touch on the why of the reason they were asking the question. So yeah, active listening is really important. And if you don't do that well, then you might solve the problem, but you potentially won't solve the problem as well as you can. And even worse, maybe not as well as a competitor, or maybe you can, but some detail you miss prevents you from being able to articulate your ability to solve the problem as better as a competitor. You might have a better solution, but if you don't listen as well as the competition, you could just lose out on that because you're not positioning the solution in alignment with the problem that needs to be solved as well as your competition is.
Yeah. Well, and what comes to mind as you're saying that is sometimes, I think there's a difference between maybe the stated problem, right? And
the implied one.
And the implied problem, right? Or the unstated problem.
Yeah.
Or like what we like to say sometimes, even the unstated emotional problem, right?
Yep.
And so active listening is usually followed not with a response or an answer, but with another question.
Another question. It has to be followed with another question, because there are very few questions, unless it's binary, right, that can't go more than one way. Maybe it's just one way or another way, but it's still, more than one way. And understanding why the question is being asked might lead to other questions that need to be asked before you provide an answer. Because I've been doing this a long time, and what I learned is that the question that comes out of the person's mouth is typically not the actual question. They're asking you a question, so you give them an answer to imply that you have the answer to this other question, which is the actual question that they didn't ask. And that usually happens because it's a reaction to something negative that's happened to them before that they're trying to prevent from happening again, or some great experience that they had that they're trying to ensure that you can duplicate. But instead of presenting the problem that needs to be solved, they want to make sure you can do this very specific thing because they loved it, or that you won't do this very specific thing because they hated it. And if you just directly answer that question without understanding where it's coming from, then you've boxed yourself in and potentially boxed out other options that you could lay on the table that gives you the ability to do something that I find to be very important, and that's actually add value to the conversation. Because you can have every answer. Do you do this? Yes. Do you do that? No. Can you solve this? Yes. And you go away like, I crushed that meeting. We checked all the boxes. We can do everything they asked for, but you haven't gotten them to think differently. You haven't made them aware of things that they may not be thinking of. And so that doesn't help you build trust. The more trust you build, the more they share with you. The more they share with you, again, the better you're able to solve that problem.
You said so many valuable things just in that little segment there. I want to double click on a couple of them. First of all, I love the fact that you said usually the question asked isn't the actual question, right? I mean, and by the way, people, like we all struggle sometimes to formulate our questions, right? It takes us a minute, right? We'll ask the question and we're still trying to figure out exactly what it is that we're trying to figure out, right? So the best sales professionals, the best sales engineers, they'll repeat the question. They'll seek to understand. And what I really mean is, okay, now we're getting some, like now we're, now I'm helping you think this through, right?
Yeah. Right? And just to chime in on that specific piece, something as simple as not even in like a pre-sales engagement, my partner will ask me, babe, what time's your first meeting in the morning? And if I just say 9 a.m., who knows?
Like, exactly.
And so I asked, like, well, what's up? Like, what do you need? What's the real question? Well, I kind of wanted to do this thing or that thing before you got your day started. No problem. I can move my meetings, or I really can't. Can we do it another day? But if I just say 9 a.m., I'm not a part of the conversation. I can literally bring no value because I've given my partner the ability to just go off and make the decision on her own, and that's it.
I love that example. Well, you know, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because if there's anything that I've learned, it's these communication skills that we're talking about. They really do apply to every aspect of life,
Yeah.
right? Whether we're dealing with a significant other, dealing with kids, right? Dealing with colleagues, and certainly prospects and customers, right? Is sincerely, let's seek to understand, let's get some context,
Yep.
right? Before, and by the way, you were a technical expert. I was a technical expert before I got into pre-sales. What are we used to doing as technical experts?
Yeah.
Providing answers. We're,
Gotta
you
have
know,
it.
like,
Gotta be accurate to the point. This is what you asked. Answer
yeah,
given.
it's what we do,
Yeah.
right? So there was another thing that you said that is worth double clicking in. Is, and you've said it a couple times now. Is this notion of value? We talk a lot. People talk a lot about, selling value and selling on value and leading with outcomes. And but I think you're even being more specific there, which is, let's add value to the conversation. And here's the way I heard what you said, in ways that maybe the customer doesn't or didn't expect, or maybe get them to begin to think a little bit more broadly, maybe about the problem or about the solution, than they've even considered. Is that sort of where you're going with that?
It is, and that's the building trust and building relationship piece for me. I think, you know, buyers are savvy. They expect us to come in and talk about how great our solutions are. I'm sure they know all about value selling. They talk to enough vendors to know that we're going to come in and sell the value of our solution as it relates to the problem that they're trying to solve. But when I say adding value, I am in this room. I am part of my organization. And so I want to add value from the perspective of what's up here. That's not something that the buyer can go to a competitor and get, right? I want to stay in the running for this deal and potentially have the ability to close this deal, knowing that people buy from people. I want this prospect to want to talk to Tia again, right? Because man, I hadn't thought of it that way, and no one else that we've talked to told us to think about that, especially if you bring up something that is, unique to their environment and also maybe a bit of a challenge for you to solve, right? That goes a long way. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I've seen this a bit before in another environment, and I'm just wondering, have you considered X, Y, and Z? I mean, I think we'd have to get a little creative on how we work that out from the perspective of what we're offering here. But I really just do think, in order to really, really solve this thing the way you want to, this is something you should think about. That just goes a long way versus only focusing on the things that I can do. That's what they expect. They expect me to sell a solution. The differentiator is also articulating, yeah, I'm selling you a solution. That's obvious, but I'm also here to help you solve your problem, whether that means I can solve the whole thing or just get you closer to thinking about the way you need to solve it.
So powerful. Folks, I'm speaking to Tia Hopkins. She is, and I have to field CTO and Chief Cyber Risk Strategist with eCentire. We don't see you out there, so if you want to say hello, I invite you to do so. If you care to ask Tia or myself a question, of course, you're welcome to do so as well. Tia, as you were speaking, something struck me. I mean, you are very well recognized in the cybersecurity space as an expert, as a thought leader. You're an author now, right? You've now published a book, right? Yet you seem to be so comfortable engaging with people. You have such a strong, like, your quote EQ, your emotional intelligence seems to be so high, and what some people call the soft skills or the professional skills, they seem to just come very easy and naturally to you. Has that always been the case, or are there certain things that you've done or learned along the way that's given you that ability to sort of connect with people and read people the way you do?
I think, the first question is no, it has not always been this way. I've always been a people person. Like I can connect with people, but it was always based on need. If it was my choice, I'd be in a dark basement with my hoodie on,
Your hoodie on.
saving the world from behind the keyboard. So historically, I would never choose to have to
Yeah.
interact. And of course, when you find yourself in pre-sales, it's like, if that's who you are, it's like, whoops, got to change that, And so in the beginning, there was a lot of anxiety because I just didn't know. What do people want from me? Because I'm not the sales rep that they're expecting to just keep the conversation going. But I also can't be this fly on a wall that says nothing, because why am I there? So for me, it came down to understanding the value that I bring. What is that? What are people looking for from me? And I started from a place of what I was comfortable with, what I know about myself, the things that I know people come to me for. And so as I started to do that and people started to respond, it got a little easier. The anxiety started to go away. And then I just started to study. I started to do the things that I realized were working. And then whether it was me doing it or something I noticed someone else doing, I stayed far, far away from the things that I realized didn't work. And as I started to draw some themes, I realized that it always came back to the people, like how the people felt. And it's, when I speak, I always tell myself, people aren't going to remember 50 to 75% of what you say. They'll follow up with you if they think that it's interesting. What they're going to remember is the way you made them feel. Were they bored? Did they want to be on their phone? Did you have interesting content? Did you pique their interest at any point? And that is what's important. How do people feel when you leave the room? And that does require tapping in, emotionally. Buying, especially in the cybersecurity space, is an emotional, it's an emotional purchase. The CISO's job and livelihood is on the line every time they make a decision on a product, on a vendor, on a person on their team, a solution, whatever it is, because if any of that fails, the person that has ultimate accountability is them. So if you go in saying, I understand the pressure that you're under. I'm not here to just force feed you my solution, because I'm going to be very clear with you. I understand that your program is this big and where I fit in is this big, but I want to help you put all those pieces together because they need, you know what I mean? You just do things like that. And it's not a mind game, at all. But you want buyers to buy from you. You want them to buy from you. You want them to come back to you to get more of what you're selling, but you also want them to come to you when they're thinking about things that you can't help with. For me, that's the biggest compliment, when you're coming to me to get my opinion on a solution that I can't provide you. But you value my input so much, and that I'm going to be transparent with you, that you're coming to me and we can talk about whether it integrates with what you have with me or not. And that's just what I do. I like to build a relationship with people, and you have to understand people in order to build that relationship. And that's where the trust comes from. And I feel like I'm rambling a bit because I'm so passionate about that aspect of it. But yeah.
You demonstrate so many of the things that I think define that gold standard. You mentioned people buy from people. You mentioned value, and something that came to mind for me is that just if and I used to approach every demo like this, whether you buy from me or not, or every meeting like this, whether you buy from us or not, this 60 minutes that you spend with us is going to be a good use of your time. You're at least going to leave this meeting feeling like that was worth our time, because we understood what they had to say. They were interesting, engaging, well-informed. We at least learned something, right? They made us feel important, right? And whether we work with them or not. And so much of what you just said sort of fell into that bucket.
Yeah, because there's elements of it too outside winning the deal, right? Of course, the technical win is what we want. I tell my team that the win-win, right, is what we really want. We don't walk in a room crush a meeting and say, boom, got the technical win. See you next time, because there's more to it than that. Otherwise, like, you've wasted your time. But even if you don't win the deal, there are other wins in that. If you do it the right way, if a prospect decides to go down another path, they feel bad for not buying from you because they want to buy from you as people. So that gives you the opportunity to get a debrief. Like, what happened? What can we do better? Is it the product? Is it, what can we change, etc.?
Yeah.
Or maybe it wasn't a fit for them, but listen, we really like what you guys have to offer. And I was at this conference, or I was at this, meeting, and I met someone that I think would be able to benefit from this, right? But if you just treat people like another line item in Salesforce or another part of your ability to hit your quota, then you're not gonna get those things. You're not gonna build relationships. And who knows, maybe they wanted to go with your solution, but there were powers that be above them that wouldn't allow it for budget, whatever. And then this person goes to another organization and they have the opportunity to come buy from you. They call you up, right? There's wins all over the place beyond the one that's right in front of us for that quarter.
Really well said. Well, and by the way, if they, let's say they do go with another solution in 6 or 12 months, that may not be going very well, right? And if you left them with a quote, good taste in their mouth, and that maybe they were lobbying for you, but someone at a more senior level said, no, we're going in this direction. Maybe now they turn back to you and say, actually, you know what? Might be a better time for you guys to come back in.
Yeah.
So absolutely love that. Folks, I'm speaking with Tia Hopkins. She's the field CTO and Chief Cyber Risk I might be able to say this once without looking at my notes. The Chief Cyber Risk Strategist with eCentire. I did see one comment from Frank Ivy chiming in, loving the conversation, gaining so much. Yes, and Frank, if you're not connected with Tia, I cannot recommend connecting with her highly enough and follow the stuff that she does, especially if you're in the cybersecurity space. So we're talking about the gold standard of what it means to be a sales engineer. So some of the things we touched on, active listening and the importance of really understanding the context of questions and digging into the question beneath or below the question. We've talked about adding value. We've talked about being a problem solver. We've talked about the fact that people buy from people, and we need to be able to connect with people on really a professional level for sure, but even an emotional level, right? And show up with that what I like to refer to as the emotional intelligence. Anything else sort of come when if someone were to say, what are the elements of, or what are the things that make, for quote, the gold standard of this technical sales profession, this pre-sales profession? Anything else come to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the things that really elevate a pre-sales professional. But what makes up a really good pre-sales professional is, the way I like to say it is, I got a big bag of tricks and I know how to use them. Right? We know a lot. We know more about our solution than anyone does, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we take that whole bag into the meeting. We do take it into the meeting with us, but we don't necessarily need to empty the entire bag on the table. And even if we have to empty everything on the table, we should not set the expectation that we talk about everything we dumped out with the same level of depth. And so what I mean by that is we have the ability to be as technical as we need to be. We have the ability to be as business-minded as we need to be. And we know how to slide the lever back and forth based on the conversation that we're in, number one, and based on the desired outcomes of that conversation, number two. Now, setting that as the baseline, I think that the pre-sales professionals that really excel are the ones that have a strong ability, and this is emotional intelligence too, a strong ability to read the room and know when to pivot. Know when to pivot to get things back on track if they're getting derailed. If there's an outcome you're looking for in this meeting and you feel like you're kind of getting off track and you're not getting there, you have to be able to pivot. And I think that's different from controlling the meeting, because you can have total control of the meeting and talk about a bunch of stuff that no one cares about, right? Yeah. But you have to get to that outcome that you set out for. And it's not always easy. And it may not always take one meeting, but being able to handle those situations that are unexpected, being able to deliver the presentation that you didn't prepare because you were told you were prepping for security operations center analyst, but you're presenting to a CISO, right? So yes, there is that sliding of the meter back and forth, but then there's also I'll refer to it as can you think on your feet? Because I've seen really, really great pre-sales professionals fail because they'll work very hard to prepare a very specific presentation. They'll go into the meeting, deliver this presentation, and every time someone asks a question, it's I'll get to that. And they keep going. Yep, I'm getting to that. I'll get to that. And and it's the same question. They keep digging in. Yep, I'll get to that. I'll get to that. And then you find at the end of the meeting, you have 2 seconds to get to probably what was the most important question,
Exactly.
in this meeting. And because you didn't get to that, now you don't get another shot at it, where you really could have dug in on what was most important to them, got them feeling really good about what it is that you're bringing to the table. And now they're listening differently to everything else you have to say, right? Because you've earned that trust. You know what I mean? You've given them confidence that they're talking to the right people. And so now they're really, dialed in and listening versus you just, okay, I built this presentation. I have to deliver this presentation. I have to get through this presentation. That's bad news.
Well, and in the process, the other thing that we're doing is we're, quote, demonstrating that our agenda is more important than you and your question.
1000%.
Right. And you're right. I mean, we tend to get so focused on our, our plan, our script, our agenda, right? Like our stuff. And if we tune out the audience, right? If we tune out and I don't know if you use these words, but situational awareness, right? Like, what do they care about? What are they showing an interest in? Right. And you mentioned, pivot and turn. Look, sometimes we have to be prepared to abort our agenda.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to do, right? Like, for crying out loud, like I spent hours preparing for this meeting, right? I've got all this material and all these wonderful things to say. But to your point, you walk in and you realize that it's different people than what we expected, and they have a different expectation.
Absolutely.
Or maybe the key individuals in the room and what they care about is, something over here, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the scariest things for me was when I moved into pre-sales leadership. And it was scary for me because I had convinced myself that my ability to handle my deals so well was based on my ability to do the research in my deals myself, because I know I ask the right questions and I pay attention to cues to dig into things. I get to the why so that I get more context. And so now that I'm in leadership, none of the deals are mine. Right? So the details that I'm getting are secondhand, sometimes third hand, and I'm having to put together a picture that I think makes the most sense to dictate what I go into this meeting with. And now I'm a leader, right? So stakes are higher, the expectations are higher. They're looking to be wowed, and I'm really going to learn something today. And if I get it wrong, if I'm off base, that's worse than, when I was in pre-sales. And so something that I actually did when I was a pre-sales individual contributor became even more important for me when I was in leadership. And that is aligning on expectations at the beginning of the meeting, right? So, talked with such and such and such, and here's what I understand to be the problem you're trying to solve, some of the details I have. So based on all of that, I thought what we would do today is blah, 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 blah. How does that sound to everyone? Is there any specific area you want to focus on first? Anything I've left out? That lets you know if you're way off base. And I've gone into meetings where folks have said, well, I was under the impression that today's meeting was for us to do blah, 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 blah. And that just let me know right away, okay, presentation out the window, let's talk.
Yeah. New plan, right? New plan. So let's pry that open a little bit further. So you were an SE for, a number of years. You moved into an SE leadership role. Now you really have a corporate wide, my perception, you have more of a corporate wide strategic role within the organization.
Right.
And you even mentioned that you're sort of like an executive SE. What would you say are some of the most valuable lessons that you learned as an SE that have prepared you for this more visible, more strategic role within the organization?
I do think it's I won't say the level of depth, because I think that implies just really getting into the weeds with the questions that we ask. But I think really understanding the problem at a level of depth that does give you the ability to drive value. Because I've, as an individual contributor, I've sat in meetings with my own leaders, with leaders of other organizations that come on, and it's just this really super high level, whole bunch of words, but didn't say anything at all. And I was like to myself, I will never be that leader. And so what that has forced me to do when I get called into a meeting is ask, what am I bringing to this meeting? What is needed from me in this meeting? Because there's nothing worse than bringing a leader or a senior executive to a call that's just a figurehead that just sits there the entire time and says nothing. It's worse than not having them there at all. I've been on those types of calls. I've seen the impact of the impact that has on a deal, when you do that. And so that was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned. I wouldn't say necessarily being in pre-sales specifically, but as an individual contributor, watching leaders and how they have the ability to positively and negatively impact a deal, and just shaping my philosophy around how I always want to make sure I have a positive impact, and not taking for granted that knowing the solution well and having influence in the organization is not enough to make a buyer feel like they need to buy into your product or solution. It's not enough to say, yeah, we got our field CTO on the call, we really value your business, and then I come on and just talk out of the side of my face about how awesome we are and where we're going, and it has nothing to do with what they care about. I've done everyone a disservice.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful, Tia. I really value those words that you ask yourself in every meeting, how can I add value? How can I help make this meeting and the outcome of this meeting better as a result of attending, right?
Yes.
Because if I can't, then there's no point in me being there. Now, have you found yourself more frequently invited into meetings where maybe you don't have that context, and so do you have to sort of do some sort of real-time assessment of sort of the individuals and what they're trying to do?
Yes. I think part of it is just who I am and what I'm comfortable with putting my name on the line for, so to speak. And it could be a little bit of a control thing. I don't know, but I do have the internal meetings. Like, what do we know? Where are we trying to go? Because at the end of the day, I could go into the meeting and say the totally right thing for the buyer, but totally just throw something off course for our internal team. So I do not take for granted that, because I might have the mind to make things land a certain way and be able to articulate what the buyer is looking to do, that I do still have to consider the goals of my internal team. And so I do have those meetings, one, to level set on where are we trying to go here? Where are we stuck? Because let's be honest, nowadays my phone doesn't ring unless it's hard. It's actually internally, there's this, they've affectionately started calling it, we need some Tia dust on this deal.
I love that.
Okay, what are we doing here? What do we need? And so there's here's where I am with it, a bit of a long-winded answer, but I do want to understand where the sales team is trying to go. What do we need to do? And then I ask, what is your perspective on why we're stuck and what we need? Okay, and then I'll get that explanation. And what I always ask, I always ask, can we just get on the call and get the buyer talking? And every time I'm like, I'll play the new girl card. Just got here. Yeah, I got the feedback from the team, but I really, I don't get on many of these calls, and I want to hear directly from you because I want this call to be as valuable for you as possible. What is it that you need from us, and what are you looking to achieve on today's call? They get it all out there. I quickly compare notes. Am I on course? Am I course correcting a bit? Because I just have to have valuable conversations, because you only get one chance to bring an executive onto a call. If you bring an executive onto a call and they bomb it, they're not going to care who else you bring on.
No, that was just our our home run hitter, right? That was our cleanup the cleanup hitter. And if
Yep.
we strike out, there's no one else to go to.
There's no one else.
Completely understand that. Folks, I'm speaking with Tia Hopkins. She is Field CTO and Chief Cyber Risk Strategist with eCentire. Did I get that right?
Got it.
And I didn't have to look at my notes. If you could believe it, Tia, we've already been at this for about 40 minutes, and we've covered a lot of ground. So I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Some of the things that we've talked about, defining the gold standard of being in pre-sales. We've talked about being good listeners, active listeners, always digging for sort of the deeper drivers, the why, the context, adding value everywhere we can. We've talked about making connections with people and this notion that people buy from people. By the way, you said a quote that I'm going to start using, which is, we've got a big bag of tricks, but we need to know which ones and we can use all of them, but we need to know which one, when and how to use which ones. Love that. Anything else that comes to mind for you in terms of sort of defining the gold standard?
I think from a gold standard perspective, that's pretty much what comes to mind for me. But I think I'll talk about differentiation. I do think, one of the differentiators is being able to pivot when necessary to continue to get to that desired outcome. But also, and I think this does go back to emotional intelligence a bit. This is one that I see pre-sales professionals struggle with quite a bit, and that is flexibility. Understanding that at the end of the day, you are still a part of the sales team. And
Amen.
that is, it's not easy. It is not easy to go into a deal and know exactly what the right solution is, but also know that if you present a certain thing, it's going to open a can of worms, and the folks that are really good at it have the ability to say, who am I playing for here? Is it the name on the front of the jersey or the name on the back of the jersey? Now, don't get me wrong, because I get into a lot of debates, with colleagues and counterparts that say, well, I'm not going to go into a deal and lie. I'm not going to say that we do things that we don't do. And I'm not suggesting that you do. I mean, especially in my world in cybersecurity, like you do that. That is a very unforgiving industry, because if you tell someone you protect them from something that you actually can't, then you're never going to sell anything else ever again. Your credibility is on the line there. But there is something to be said about saying enough to get both jobs done, and that's solve the problem, get the deal across the finish line, without saying too much and introducing confusion. And so maybe, if you mention this one thing, like you feel like if you mention this one thing, they'll understand it so much better. But are they going to understand it in a way that's going to help get you closer to signature? Do they understand everything they need to know to get you to signature? Or are you introducing something that might now create the need for 3 more meetings?
Yeah. Well, and you may recall one of my favorite sayings, thou shalt not voluntarily confess thy sins.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
yes.
Because as a sales engineer, we're so concerned about misleading our customers. We're so concerned about overselling that we overcompensate, right? And offer cautionary advice where cautionary advice is not warranted, right? Not only is it potentially detrimental to the deal and the sale, it's detrimental to our customers, right? Like that's not something they are going to make a bad decision if they start worrying about this now.
Yes.
Right? Like, so let's not introduce doubt, fear, and uncertainty where it's not warranted.
Exactly.
Right?
And now, accepting that, it's the hard part. I've met a lot of pre-sales professionals that struggle with that, because to them, the solution feels incomplete without this thing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as complete as you want it to be, but we also need to understand that the definition of value, the definition of solution, the definition of completeness is not ours. It's the buyer's. And they could have been sold 5 words in, but you feel like completion is 10, and you get to word 8 and you blow it up when you had the sale at 5.
Yeah. No, those are really good words. By the way, you used a phrase that I want to circle back on because it caught my attention. You said, "Are we I wasn't sure if you sold. Are we selling to or are we selling from? But are we selling to the front of the jersey or the back of the jersey? Did I hear that
Oh,
right?
four. Yeah.
Four.
Right.
Okay. So in other words, am I representing the company or am I representing myself? Is
Exactly.
really what you're saying. I absolutely love that. I am using that from now on
Good.
because
Finally, I give you something to use because I got to tell
that
you, your analogy about the shovel and the hole and the tree and oh my
I
goodness,
keep the
it's
shovel
just
right. I keep the shovel right here every
man,
time I reference it.
it is incredible. I'm like, dude, are they buying a shovel or are they buying a fence, people?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I
Fantastic.
love that. Well, that back of the jersey and front of the jersey, I absolutely love that. Well, and if we're fully honest with ourselves, and it's in the, that can be difficult at times, right? Is a lot of times when we feel compelled to say a certain thing, right? Honestly, it does come from a place of ego, right? It comes from like we have our own agenda. What's our agenda? We want to look brilliant, like we want to look like the smartest person in the room. We want to demonstrate how smart we are, right? We want to demonstrate our knowledge and expertise. And at the end of the day, it's not about us.
It's
It's about
not,
our
and I mean,
customer, right?
go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
No, no, no. Well, it's about our customer, right? And it's about the team, right? It's about us doing what's right for the customer and doing what's best for the team.
Yeah, that's the
So
hard part. You got to do both.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, you have to do both to get the
Bingo.
total, the total win, and it's not always easy. I mean, you think about situations you go into where you are just not philosophically aligned with the decision maker. You
Exactly.
can't walk out because if they're
Yep.
talking to you, then they feel like you can solve the problem. And it's not that you have to tell them the wrong way to do it. You just have to deliver your solution in a language, right? That they are
Mm.
speaking, which may not feel good to you. But again, it's not about the name on the back of the jersey, and you got to get her done.
So love that. By the way, so Jeff Stewart, he is another one of my clients. Actually, we've done some work together. He said, "Chris, that's your Tia dust." So you just sprinkled some Tia dust on
Sprinkling
on
some
on
dust.
on on my messaging.
There
That's
might be
fantastic.
something to that.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks, Chris.
Jeff, good to see you. Thanks for the comment. Tia, you have been so gracious with your time. It's Thanksgiving week, and I know you're crazy busy, so I cannot thank you enough. Any just closing words or thoughts to share with anybody who might be still tuned in as we wrap things up here?
I think that, I mean, we've said a lot here, right? Just things that to keep in mind to move deals forward, to, be the gold standard. But I think that one thing we didn't touch on, and I think you do touch on this in your training, you touched on all the things. It was amazing, like
That's
incredible.
very nice of you.
But
Thank you.
just don't get so caught up in the weeds, right? That
Mm,
you forget what you're there to do.
yeah.
The three things I always say is begin with the end in mind. What am I here to do?
Yep.
Where am I trying to go?
Yep.
Speak the language that needs to be spoken, right?
Mm,
So if you're talking to an analyst, fine, talk bits and bytes. If you're talking to a CIO, you might need to talk dollars and cents, right? And then remain focused on the desired outcome, right? If
yeah.
they're looking to buy an SUV from you because they want to go on a desert safari in the middle of August, make sure that getting wrapped around the axle doesn't land them in an airplane going to Greece in the middle of April, right? Because it tends to happen. You start talking feature functionality. Does it do this? Does it do that? And all of a sudden,
Yeah.
the thing that they called you for to do for them is not what you're focused on at all.
Yeah.
And it's very, very, very easy to go down that path.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredibly true words, my friend. Well, Tia, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time. I've been doing this for a couple of years, and I've been eager to have you join. So I can't let you get out of here without just inviting you to share. So you actually coach am I correct? Is it a full contact tackle football? Is that correct?
Yes, and all women.
an all women's tackle football league. And the name of the team you coach is what?
So I coach for AFE, American Football Events, and so it's an international team. So we compete with teams all over the world with a team assembled of players from all over the U.S. and actually we get players from other countries at times as well.
And this is American football. We're not, because I know the World Cup is going on. And there's a lot of this is American football, like
yes.
pads and helmets and the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
Is there one lesson that you have learned in coaching football that translated into pre-sales or your role as a pre-sales leader?
Yeah, there's a couple. We talk a lot about confidence in this field. And in football, the thing that I learned is confidence has no competition. That has taken me a long way in my career. And the thing that I yell at my players all the time is mind over matter. If you don't mind, it don't matter. And then I take that mentality into my career as well, whether it's me, trying to level up or trying to learn a new skill or banging my head against the wall on how to get a deal done. It's focus on the things that matter, truck all the things that don't.
That is awesome. Confidence, mind over matter. Absolutely love that. Folks, there you have it. Tia Hopkins. She is the field CTO and chief cyber risk strategist with eCentire. And the name of your book is?
It is Hack the Cybersecurity Interview, and I co-authored it with Ken Underhill and Chris Foulon. Hack
the Cybersecurity Interview. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. Yep.
Okay. Find it on Amazon. Connect with her on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Tia, you're one of the most interesting and vibrant individuals I've ever had the opportunity to speak with. You do, every time I go to LinkedIn, you're on another podcast or cover of a magazine or something. So it's been an absolute pleasure working with you and getting to know you over these years. Thank you for spending some time. Hang around just for a minute. I'm going to give you your parting gift. Folks, the rest of you, thanks for dialing in. If you joined us, thank you so much. And if you're inspired to come check us out on Tech Sales Advisors, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, have a good Thanksgiving, and we will see you next time on Tech Sales Advice. Thanks, Tia.
Thanks,
Bye,
Chris.
all.